Working from home, learning from home. More than ever, COVID has forced our lives online. Enter a government program handing out gift cards to help people pay for access to the internet. There's just one problem.
We don't know whether the money was spent, where the money was spent, or if it was spent on what we said we were going to spend it on.
On top of that, a bunch of people who applied for the help didn't even get it. Mayor Ted Wheeler one-on-one answering questions about Portland's surge in shootings.
Look, the public is tired of talk. If there's one thing I am keenly aware of, they're tired of aspirational goals. They want to see action and they want to see results.
But does results mean more police? And does the mayor really think he can make that happen? And did you drop, cover, and hold on for the great Oregon shakeout? Governor Brown sure did. One question, what if your building collapses? I mean, really, how strong is your desk? What is your take on that advice?
Sometimes one size fits all doesn't always work.
Here's the story. Good evening on this Thursday night. Busy night, as you can see, and we, as always, want to hear from you. So email thestory@kgw.com. Reach out on social media once you see kind of the content that we have here tonight. We want to hear what you think. And remember, your questions and your comments drive this show. All right, time now for the big story. Nothing has been easy during the pandemic. That much we know. And a lot of people have struggled to pay like their rent or just keep their jobs or feed their families. So to try and help, the feds funneled billions to local governments via the CARES Act. And they told cities like Portland, hey, the money is yours. Distribute it as you see fit. So the city said, OK, thank you. And they did just that. As investigative reporter Kyla Oboshi found, one program handed out $3 million in cash cards to help low-income people get access to the internet. But here's the thing. They had no way to monitor if or how that money was actually spent.
The pandemic forced us all to go online for work, for school.
We just wrote one number in 3 different ways.
Even community events. But for some people who have limited access to the internet or no access at all, this transition hasn't been so easy. So to help bridge the digital divide, the city of Portland used $3 million in CARES Act funding to buy thousands of debit cards preloaded with $364 each to cover the cost of internet for 1 year. But a KGW investigation found the government program had structural flaws. Smart City PDX, which led the city's effort, had no system in place to determine whether funds were used for their intended purpose, a key measurement of the program's success. Critics explain the program relied on good faith, that recipients would use the $364 cash cards on internet instead of something else.
We don't know whether the money was spent, where the money was spent, or if it was spent on what we said we were going to spend it on.
By contrast, similar projects elsewhere, including Houston.
Last week, City Council voted to launch an internet voucher program.
And a state-run program in Alabama provided vouchers for service providers like Comcast to ensure that qualified applicants could stay connected.
The vouchers will cover monthly internet service through the end of December.
Smart City PDX suggested that prepaid gift cards gave recipients greater freedom, privacy, and convenience, explaining on its website, Internet assistance cards allow each individual to identify the best way for them to connect to the internet. KGW's analysis of Smart City PDX records obtained through a public records request found the program had unequal distribution. More than 800 people received 2 or more prepaid debit cards. One person took home 6 cash cards valued at more than $2,000. Another person got 5 debit cards despite listing only 4 people in their household. Officials from Smart City PDX explained some recipients needed more costly high-speed internet due to the number of people in the home. The uneven distribution of internet cards is a problem because most of the people who wanted one were left empty-handed. Of the 23,000 requests for internet assistance, only 36% of the requests were met. Records also suggested 60 people who got cash cards were not eligible because they don't live within Portland city limits, a requirement of the government program. Now, there's no denying this is an important project, specifically aimed at helping those who need reliable connectivity most, including people of color, people with disabilities, and seniors. A 2018 survey found 32,000 households lacked internet service in Multnomah County, and about half those households don't have a computer. Portland's Smart City program relied on 24 community organizations to help deliver Chromebook computers, iPads, and internet cards. The bulk of the project went to buying those 8,000 prepaid debit cards, each preloaded with $364. Recipients of the cash cards pledged to use the money to pay for internet service, but were not required to submit their name, receipts, or other documentation of how the funds were used. Program designers admit once the prepaid debit cards were distributed, there was no way to monitor if, where, or how they were used. It was no different than handing out $364 in cash. Eric Fruits of Cascade Policy Institute questioned whether the program achieved its intended outcome.
If the goal is just handing out gift cards, then they achieved that goal. But if the goal was to provide increased internet access, then we have no way of knowing.
Smart City PDX did require the nonprofits distributing the debit cards collect anonymous data about recipients, and most did. But some of that demographic data was incomplete or missing. KGW made multiple requests for an on-camera interview, but the Smart City PDX team declined. As Portland looks to bridge the digital divide in the future and potentially allocate more funding, one critic argues it's important to measure success.
Who are we trying to help? Did we actually help them? I think that's important. It's not just important from a good government standpoint, but it's also important from the standpoint of, are we helping the people that we intend to help?
Okay, Kyla Oboshi joining me now. So Kyle, I mean, we know debit cards, most debit cards can tell you where your money was spent. Things like, restaurants and entertainment venues, groceries, that kind of thing. So can't they, in this case, just ask the bank for a breakdown?
You're right. Some cards, they do have that feature, but not the cards the city of Portland bought for this particular program. It really is like cash. There's no monitoring. Now, other programs like the Housing Bureau's PDX Assist, that program handed out a different type of card that does allow for some reporting. You can monitor if a card is activated. The bank can also tell you where it has been used, although not necessarily what it's been used to buy.
All right, interesting. Kyla Oboshi, thank you. It is a record-breaking year for shootings and homicides in Portland. The headlines about these skyrocketing numbers have really been tough to miss. We actually asked Portland police for the latest data, and they say that as of today, there have been more than 1,000 shootings in this city, 1,026, as you can see, to be exact. 320 people have been hurt in these shootings, and 52 people were shot to death this year. That number far surpassing the record. Now, here at KGW, we have a team working to cover Portland's battle with gun violence, including Mike Benner, who actually sat down with Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler today. And so, Mike, what did he tell you?
Well, Maggie, as you may have noticed, he has been keeping a pretty low profile.
Right.
But he decided today was the day to sit down and address gun violence. And he says, like we all have, the record levels of it. And he, of course, he is troubled by it. In the coming weeks, the mayor says he hopes to get a specialized police unit up and running. This would be the focused intervention team. They'll be tasked with intervening and preventing gun violence. He is also hoping to rehire a bunch of retired police officers. But here's the million-dollar question. Is this even feasible? Will they want to come back and work in Portland?
I do believe so. The chief has already had conversations with folks both in the union as well as rank and file members, and we do believe that there would be interest in this program.
And you think this could have a direct impact on the gun violence in our city?
There is no question in my mind that if we have the focused intervention team fully staffed, which I expect to have happen next month and deployed, in addition to the enhanced community safety team that I directed the chief to deploy several months ago that makes sure that we have investigative follow-up for gun violence, and if we add to that a longer-term strategy around rebuilding the Portland Police Bureau so we can get back to community policing, which is what we should be doing in the first place, as opposed to just having officers bounce from call to call to call in their cars, this will definitely have an impact on reducing gun violence. And I want to be clear, because some people will hear me say, well, there goes Ted saying he wants to increase police. Whatever happened to reform? I don't think making sure that the police bureau has the adequate tools, resources, training, and personnel is any way inconsistent with also implementing more community oversight, transparency, and accountability.
All right, so speaking of that accountability and that transparency, Mayor Wheeler says in the next year to year and a half, he hopes to have officers wearing body cameras. Now, this cannot happen immediately because the city and police union need to talk about when the cameras will be on, when they're off, and who manages the data and how.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you and I were talking about this question before you went to the interview, because we hear from people at home, and a lot of people feel like the mayor can take a lot of the blame for the gun violence on our streets, just kind of the general lawlessness and chaos on our streets, all kinds of crimes. And so I'm curious, does Mayor Wheeler think Portland has become just kind of categorically unsafe?
All right, so we of course asked that question. Yeah. He did not come out and say yes, but he alluded to it. Take a listen. Do you think Portland is less safe today than it was several years back, say when you were elected or re-elected?
So it depends on what statistics you're looking at. There are some criminal activity that has skyrocketed, most notably gun violence. There's other criminal activity that has gone way down. But it sort of doesn't matter. The reality is, in overwhelming numbers, more Portlanders are saying they don't feel safe in their community. And as a result, they're making life decisions based on their feeling of being unsafe. We're seeing businesses choose not to reopen. We're seeing employees choose not to come back to downtown. We're seeing people who are afraid to take public transit. We're seeing people not being as willing as they should be to go to restaurants or visit retail establishments.
All right, we had about 15 minutes with Mayor Wheeler this afternoon, and Maggie will, of course, post the entire conversation in its entirety on YouTube.
All right, Mike Benner, great questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on now to some super subtle safety messaging from Governor Kate Brown. No, for real, this is really important. The governor here clearly participating in the Great Oregon Shakeout, a statewide earthquake drill, and she tweeted today, today serves as an important reminder to have a plan with your family, be 2 weeks ready, and make sure you've signed up for emergency alerts. And by the way, she wasn't the only one. The state sent these photos out. I'm sure you know everyone here doing the classic drop, cover, and hold on. The gold standard of earthquake safety, like get under a sturdy desk or table, thereby protecting yourself from falling objects. But is that always the best policy? Well, one earthquake geologist from Oregon State University says he wishes we would have more conversations about that. What is your take on that advice?
That really kind of evolved from civil defense things from the 1950s and 60s when you're supposed to get under your desk in case of a nuclear attack. And it hasn't really gone through the same sort of vetting process as we would like to see.
Professor Chris Goldfinger there, he went on to say stop, drop, and hold on works great in countries like, say, Japan, who have had earthquake resilient building codes far longer than we have. So in short, a lot of our buildings are not stable enough to withstand a major quake.
We have a bit of a different case. We have a lot of URM buildings, a lot of pancakeable, lift slab type buildings and things like that. And so the question is, is importing that drop, cover, and hold on policy that works great in Japan, is that really going to serve people the best and save the most lives? And so what I'm suggesting is that we just have a more reasoned conversation about whether that's good advice or not.
So we've reported on Goldfinger's questions about this guidance before. The Oregonian did a write-up on it today. You can see most of the headline there. Goldfinger told me he wants to be clear. He's not urging people to drop the gold standard central to today's drill and then just run screaming into the streets during the next quake. That would be insane. What he wants is research, and he says he's pushed multiple universities and agencies, including the governor's office, to invest in that research. But no dice yet. So in the absence of that, I asked him, what are we, the non-scientists who would just like to not die during an earthquake, supposed to do? And the professor basically didn't want to give blanket advice, but he did tell me about one example, and that is his workplace.
I was able to walk around my building and take a look at it, and I looked up the year that it was built. It was 1964, I think, and the same year that plate tectonics sort of hit the big time. And so I know it's old, and I know it's vulnerable, and I know it's not been retrofitted. And I also work on the first floor near the door. And so knowing these few little bits of things, that I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a better idea to leave the building.
Yeah, sounds that way. So that being said, Goldfinger was clear in his opinion for most people, especially at home, drop, cover, and hold on is still your best bet, at least until we know more. Confused about booster shots? You're not alone, especially with all the new talk about mixing and matching shots, who's eligible for what, and when you can even get them. We've got some answers when the story continues. Welcome back. Keep sending in your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com or reach out to us on social media. Our team is watching right now. We always read your messages during the show. Here's an email, speaking of, that we got from AJ, one of the medical consultants on NBC Nightly News. AJ said they were seeing excellent results from getting a booster of a different type / brand, i.e., mixing and matching. Do you have any information on this? AJ went on to say, I have a multitude of health problems, and my doctor expressed concern that I had gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, implying I am less protected than if I would have gotten the other vaccines. AJ, I'm so sorry. That has to be really, really nerve-wracking. They went on to say, so I am someone interested in getting a booster of Pfizer or Moderna if that ever becomes possible or recommended. Okay, so again, always talk to your doctor. We want to stress that. But at least with the info coming out of the CDC, you are in luck because today an advisory panel approved booster shots for both Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, and they're all for the mix and match approach. The CDC director just signed off on this plan, so that means, yeah, this is a go. The thing is, boosters will only be available, at least for now, for certain people. If you got Johnson & Johnson and you're over 18, you will be able to get a booster from any brand. So AJ, it sounds like that's for you. If you got Moderna, you will be able to get a booster if you're 65 and older, plus have to have underlying health conditions or basically a high-risk job. Same story, by the way, for Pfizer on that one. But the CDC panel also voted to let Moderna or Pfizer recipients mix and match their booster shots as well. So the mixing and matching is pretty universal. So now hospitals around here are preparing to give boosters out. Here's Christine Pitawanich.
It's been a big week for people who got the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine and have been waiting to get a booster shot.
Our employees pretty much just got Moderna vaccine because we didn't have the sort of deep freezers that were required to store the Pfizer at the beginning of the pandemic. So the staff are so excited to be able to finally get it.
Over at Columbia Memorial Hospital in Astoria, preparations are underway to begin offering healthcare workers their Moderna COVID-19 booster shots next Friday, the 29th. They're planning to have full approval to use Moderna and Johnson & Johnson as boosters by next week.
My name's Chris Lehman. I'm the Director of Pharmacy for Columbia Memorial Hospital in Astoria, Oregon. And in that role, for about the last year, I've been a big part of the county's vaccination program here in Clatsop County.
And Lehman has been watching the process closely, a process that can be confusing.
There's a lot of acronyms and other subcommittees and things like that.
Here's a flowchart from the Oregon Health Authority explaining the process. First, the FDA, then the CDC have to grant authorization. Next,
there'll be a group of Western states, which is Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and California, that has set up their own group that will review the data and make a recommendation.
The idea to be on the same page. Then it's up to the governor to give final approval. It's a long process, but for a reason.
When you're dealing with very new information that's changing all the time and you want it to be reviewed really thoroughly so that you are making sure that it's as safe as possible. And so that's why all of these steps have been put into place.
As of this moment, Pfizer is still the only booster that's been authorized for people at least 6 months after their last shot, who are 65 years and older, and those over 18 with underlying medical conditions, live in a long-term care setting, or who work or live in a high-risk setting. Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.
So again, just a few moments ago, we have an update on that. The CDC director did approve boosters for all 3 shots. All right, shifting gears, what is your top vacation destination? I would just like to go on a vacation, but what about Hawaii or Paris? Or how about Greenland? Well, turns out a lot of tourists are going to Greenland to get a glimpse of melting glaciers. That is depressing and horrifying. And by the way, an Oregon researcher is studying the impact that travel has along with climate change. We'll talk about it when the story continues. Welcome back. So sometimes viewers think we focus a little too much on the Portland metro area, and that's valid. So for this next story, let's do a little traveling. How about to Greenland? Thousands of miles away. A researcher at the University of Oregon is studying actually the trickle-down effects of Greenland's melting glaciers. Here's Kyla Chalmers.
Scientists agree Greenland's ice is melting at an accelerated rate. We hear about it often in the news. The massive glaciers are melting, causing sea levels to rise. But while a rising sea level seems to be the most talked about impact, it is certainly not the only one.
It also has real implications for the people living in Greenland.
Mark Carey is the director of the Environmental Studies program at the University of Oregon. He and a team of researchers were just awarded a nearly $3 million grant to get a better understanding of those impacts, one of which comes as the result of increased tourism in Greenland.
There's this last chance tourism of, I want to go see the ice before it disappears, or glaciers are a new icon of climate change, so I want to go and see those and see the icebergs and see that.
In recent years, tourists began flocking to the small communities to get a glimpse of the disappearing ice. And that, like rising sea levels, has impacts on the environment, but also on the residents.
Some of those are helpful. New people get jobs. Some of those are detrimental in terms of changing customs, bringing new people in, cruise ships landing, and altering what a small town of 600 people is like.
And for those small communities that rely on fishing, changing ocean temperatures and circulation due to the melting ice are making it harder.
But it also might have impacts on the global economy in terms of fish availability elsewhere.
Just a few examples of changes we will see as the ice melts, because along with the ice sheets, researchers expect so much will disappear as our climate rapidly warms. Understanding now what those changes will be will help everyone prepare for them and even counter them in the future.
We know that there are changes that are occurring, but we're going to investigate and see what exactly those are.
Kyla Chalmers, KGW News.
Okay, that's a sobering story. Keep sending in your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com and find us on social media. We're going to finish the show right after this. I want to remind everybody about our Hey Help campaign. And this week we're asking you to consider donating to Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center and Rosemary Anderson High School, or POIC, and RAHS. They provide workforce training and career placement for communities of color, as well as violence reduction programs. You'll have a chance to scan that QR code in a minute, so get your phone ready. But first we wanted to show you these awesome photos of the people that POIC helps and let you hear from President Joe McFerrin II about how hard the last couple of years have been for the families they serve.
Our enrollment has been impacted in our schools because of COVID and the gun violence. That means enrollment's down. I think that's going to be temporary, but the feedback that we're getting from parents and concerned family members is there's just concern. There's huge concerns about the violence and COVID. So we're going to work through this.
Yeah, they have the same concerns the mayor talked about earlier in Mike's piece. All right, here's your big chance to donate. Just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code or go to kgw.com/heyhelp. And again, this is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. It all makes a difference. And if you have any ideas for our Hey Help campaign, let us know by emailing thestory@kgw.com. And while you're doing that, pick up your phone and follow us on Twitter at @thestoryKGW, same handle on Instagram. And that is the end of the story, so let's bring in Laurel Porter now.
Thank you, Maggie. The director of the CDC has now given final approval